One thing I did notice when I've seen some of your content is I noticed a lot of people tend to keep variables like sodium and potassium relatively stable. I believe I remember seeing you mention manipulating those variables a little bit more. I was just curious if that's kind of changed over time with playing around with it, or do you generally keep those variables constant, or is there a reason why you bump one up and lower one?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I find myself in a weird spot in my career because when I first started, there was still a lot of real old school bro bodybuilders. And when I first started, I was kind of known as like the science guy, like this nerdy science coach. Don't think about it too much, just do it. And then I've changed a few things over the course of the years, but really my approach is still the same. Like I use science and scientific reasoning to inform my decision making, right? But I've never been a slave to the research. And so now, because the scientific approach is so popular, but I think a lot of people are slave to the research. Now I'm kind of known as the bro meathead guy. And I haven't changed. You guys have all changed, They're like, if you look good, don't touch it. I mess with it every time. Because I think it makes a bigger difference than people realize in terms of what we're looking at as intramuscular and subcutaneous fluid retention. Um, the body does like to keep pretty tight ratios on things, but I do think you can slightly, if you know what you're doing, you can slightly swing that pendulum one way for a day or two, right? But I think that there are ways to make aggressive but intelligent changes. And so I think sodium and potassium is also one of the more variable metrics that you can play with during peak week. What I mean by that is I think that what works for one person on sodium and potassium can work wildly differently for another person. I've typically, so I think my experience comes into play with that because when I first started, I started conservative with my adjustments. And I've even found different ethnicities often tend to have pretty different, seems almost like different kidney filtering rates in terms of like how do we process and eliminate excess sodium. I mean, if you just look at the sodium intakes between white people and black people, generally I can just load sodium up on a pale person. You know what I mean? But then I kind of want to like maybe load it up earlier for someone that has darker skin and then taper it off because it seems like that filtering rate is a lot slower.